It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Studio, welcome back. We've got Ms. Hannah Webb is with us. Hannah, welcome.
Thank you. It's always good to be here.
Always good to have you. So first off, congratulations on law school.
Thank you.
Us, you're in your first semester, the end of the first semester.
Yes.
So I'm sure, what, do they call them finals?
Yes.
Okay, so
Yeah, they're hot and heavy.
Okay, so how's that going?
So prior to this week, because I'm now studying for finals, I've had a great experience. I love law school. I think it's been very enjoyable. The workload is super intense, and that's the biggest change. But as a whole, it's been super enjoyable because I've talked about it in your program before. I'm completely unconventional. I have a biology background. I thought I was going to go to med school up until it's literally been a year and a half, basically, since I've changed my mind to go to law school. So I did a complete 180. I jumped into law school completely blind, had no idea what I was walking into, and I have loved it, thoroughly enjoyed it. It's very different, but in a good way, and it's been very refreshing. And obviously, I love the legal field for various political reasons. And so it's like my hobby has manifested itself into my work now. So it's been nice.
That's great. So being a conservative was, you certainly are conservative. We've had you on the Young Conservative, so you're saying it was a hobby, but now it's like you're able to actually really get into the meat and potatoes of it. What's funny is I got a family member, my sister did the same thing. She had a zoology degree and wanted to go the med school route, and then at the last minute was like, I'll take the LSAT. And then, boom, it just, took off from there. So the unconventional route, I think, can make some of the best attorneys.
So, and actually, it's been the best thing that's happened to me because undergrad, it was just extremely difficult. And it was very self-taught. So they'd hand you a textbook and say, here you go, learn the whole thing by finals, and we'll just kind of talk about it during class.
Yeah.
And essentially what I would do is make my own study guides, which now in law school are outlines, and that's what you study. So I have this great study background because I had to. And the way of thinking that a biology person or a medical person, or math and science really, is the same type of process that you have to apply in the legal field. Like you learn the facts in biology, so you learn the rules in law, and then you apply them to your situations, like you apply them to your patient, and now you apply it to your case. So it's been a huge benefit for me because all the English people, the philosophy people, the political science people, they were taught to create your own thoughts, create your own ideas about what's going on. You don't get to do that in legal field anymore. You have to take what the law is and fit it to your scenario. And then on top of that, I haven't taken an English class since my senior year of high school, maybe. So I write like a fifth grader, and I am not ashamed of that. My first memo I got back, the teacher put a question mark on it and said, "Are you missing words here?" And I was like, "No, that was a complete thought. I guess it was just an incomplete sentence."
Yeah.
Which I've developed since then. But it's been wonderful because you're supposed to write like an eighth grader. An eighth grader is supposed to be able to take your paper and read what you wrote because you're not always talking to your legal
peer.
Yes. You're talking to your client, or the public or whatever. And so it's been wonderful. I've been able to be molded into how they want me to write. And my thinking is just the way my brain is programmed to work is how they want you to start thinking.
Now, I was talking to you during the break. We're talking with Hannah Webb. As far as this idea of indoctrination, I know you're only in your first semester, but you don't feel that way at all, right? You feel very free, right?
I really don't. So I've talked about it on your show before. My undergrad was terrible, especially as a biology major. I was shocked how indoctrinated it was. And so in the legal profession, obviously everyone has a political side. That's just the nature of the field. And so I expected it to be much worse in law school. I expected to be in the total minority and just indoctrination left and right. I have been thoroughly surprised with how that's not the case. In the majority of my classes, it's extremely professional. They come in, they teach you the black letter of law. They'll talk about underlying policy, but for the most part, they argue both sides. It's only in one of my classes where the opinion leads the conversation. Of course, that's super annoying. I'm paying you to teach me the law. I'm not paying you to tell me your opinion.
Right.
But on the flip side of that, just as a legal field, it's okay to be political within your profession. I have no problem with professors having a political affiliation and campaigning for that cause in their professional capacity, especially when they're writing papers and things like that. That's fine with me. So that atmosphere in law school is more liberal than it is conservative, obviously. But especially with millennials, people talk all the time how there's no conservatives anymore. They're all liberal. All my friends are conservative. And of course, like attracts like. Of course, that's the people you're drawn to.
That's good.
But even well before I knew how these people voted, those are the people I became friends with. They're all conservative. And we are in the minority, but it's not as much of a minority as what the media will lead you to believe that it is. And I have loved how I am in the minority because it's challenged me to be a better thinker. So I've spent, it's been about a year since I've been this involved in politics. It's actually been a year anniversary since I've been on your show. I don't know if you know that.
I did not. Are you serious?
It's maybe 2 weeks past a year since I've been on your show for the first time. It was still the Paul Harrell program back then.
Wow. Yeah. That's crazy. That's crazy. Okay. Well,
so it's been.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you,
Hannah.
So it's been. That was really the kickoff of when I dug into the meat of things. And that was right when I decided to go to law school. And since then, I've just been surrounded by people who think like me. And that's wonderful and refreshing, and you learn a lot. And it's a great place to start when you're just getting started out, because you almost have mentors that develop out of it. But now I'm at the place in life where I need to be challenged, and somebody needs to push me on my ideas so that I strengthen in them. Or it's never, ever a bad thing to understand how the other side thinks and why they think it.
That's exactly right.
So that's been a wonderful thing about law school. My favorite professor that I have, he is a wonderful teacher. He may be the best teacher I've ever had in my life. He is as liberal as I am conservative. We have the best conversations, and I respect him so much because every conversation we have, he tells me what he thinks and then all the factual reasons why.
Yeah.
I respect that all day long, and it challenges me to dig into the meat of what I believe and why I believe it.
Yeah. It sounds like some civil debates are going on, and that's really good. Now that's different than saying, what happens at Berkeley when a conservative speaker shows up and they burn the campus down. So that's refreshing. What were your thoughts? What are your thoughts about that? But what are your thoughts about the midterms and everything, how everything shook out? What's your political thought? As a millennial, let's get the
So interesting about a millennial. Me and Joe were just talking about this. I'm almost a Generation Z.
Which is what? Which is what?
Know.
What is that?
I don't know. So both the Generation Z, the cap is the mid 1990s.
Okay.
And the start of millennials is the mid 1990s. I was born in 1995.
Wow.
Put me in whatever category
it's
you
want. It's like
want.
the year Jurassic Park came out and TLC had the music video "Don't Go Chasing Waterfalls." I'm serious. That's how old I am. But that is wild that would be. Anyway, go ahead.
So
Sorry.
I fit into one of those categories.
I'm old.
And Joe, you can if you go fact check this and I'm wrong, blame Joe. He said that Generation Z has been the most conservative little niche of all the generations that have come up.
Really?
So that may explain a lot about myself. Who knows?
Yeah.
The midterms didn't shock me. I did think federally, I knew we'd take the Senate and flip seats. I knew we'd do that. I really thought we'd hold the House, so I'm very disappointed that we didn't.
I did too. Larry Schweikert thought that as well. Matter of fact, right after Larry Schweikert was on this program, Rush Limbaugh gave him a shout out. That was fascinating.
That's awesome.
Yeah, because Limbaugh was looking at his same analytics and data as well. Of course, now there's an article saying that they're accusing Fox News of making Orange County in California go completely blue because they called the election, with several hours to go with the polls still open out in Orange County.
Very interesting.
And it was so weird when Fox News called it for the Dems when they hadn't flipped the seats they needed on the East Coast.
Right.
But anyway, that's neither here nor there. So yeah, I was disappointed that they didn't take the House or keep the House.
Right. And I didn't have. Of course, I was listening to political analysis, but after a while, that just gets on my nerves, quite frankly. So nothing more than a hunch, just because what happened back in the general election with Trump. Trump said, I'm going to take it. I believed him. And so this time he said, red wave. By golly, I believed you because you were right last time.
Yeah.
But none of that's a shock. And I don't think it's going to be anything huge detrimental to us. It's going to make things much more complicated.
Yeah.
But the fact that we do have the Senate and Trump, I don't think it's going to be as bad as what it could be. So I'm okay with that.
Ruth Bader Ginsburg. We've got, the potential, she's going to be the next one, you would think. I mean, she's not going to retire. We don't want anything bad to happen to her. I mean, obviously, but I think a lot of people look at that and they say, hey, listen, this is probably going to be another appointment for Trump at some point in the future. And you'd think that whoever it is, Amy Coney Barrett, is going to sail through confirmation at this point. With what is it, 53-47?
Yes.
So
kudos to Ruth Bader Ginsburg for breaking her ribs and being back to work like 2 days later.
Yep, that's pretty big
Gotta
deal.
respect that.
Mhm.
Gotta respect that. So, again, about being politically challenged, law school has been the first time that I've ever been introduced with the idea of term limits for the Supreme Court and maybe the dangers of having the Supreme Court weighted one side or the other. And that's been an interesting conversation. I have no dead set feeling on that, but it was interesting to hear the commentary on it because I do think we love that it's conservative right now, but what's it going to be like if it ever flips the other direction?
Yeah.
So it's like basically biting the hand that feeds you.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see. Of course, I would be thrilled to have a conservative Supreme Court. It'd be wonderful for all my present day political feelings.
Yep.
But that was a new idea that I've been introduced to that I've never given any thought at all. Very interesting. And actually, the guy who presented it in a debate I was watching is a conservative. So, really interesting. He's done research on it. I haven't read it. That's the gist of what I know about it. But it was a very interesting conversation that I just got to hear. So,
well, it sounds like, your experience in law school has been good. Like I said, in terms of just being able to have civil debate. You don't see that very often. I mean, you certainly don't see that in the news media anymore, and you don't see that. I posted on Facebook the other day, yesterday, a long form interview with Mark Levin and his guest on his Fox News show, and just how refreshing it is to sit down with somebody, for a long time, for like a full hour, and somebody who's an intellectual or somebody who's accomplished, and actually talk to them and figure out why they feel the way they do. Whereas when the 24-hour news cycle, you only have little snippets. You have 2 minutes here or 5 minutes here, and it's like we're on to the next outrage. We're on to the next thing that's going to get us ratings and an emotional response. And I mean, there was a story a while back, Hannah, that you have these psychologists in Washington, D.C. who have actually seen an increase in their business because of Donald Trump's presidency, because there's so many people that actually do have this Trump derangement syndrome. Like, it's a real thing, and they need psychological help to cope with daily existence. And I'm just thinking, wow, it's amazing that we've come to this particular moment in history.
Well, first of all, I think that's ridiculous.
Yeah,
I mean, don't get me wrong. If you need counseling, by all means, go get counseling. But that's a little ridiculous. But it's so refreshing to get to the meat of things, like get to the heart of a fully thought idea. Because I'm like you, I get very frustrated, even with Fox News, just 5-minute conversations about something, headline, move on, and you talk about it every hour on the hour, and you don't ever get
you're actually the
thought.
second person in the last couple of weeks that have said that they actually have to turn Fox News off sometimes because
absolutely. A lot of times I'll catch the headlines and then I have a brain. I can form my own opinions about it.
Yeah.
I don't need you to tell me my opinion. But as far as like the civil conversation, I don't know if it's like geographically where we're located, where Arkansas is so conservative that they just know they have to deal with us. And so like you can't just cause an outrage in the law school in the middle of Arkansas because conservatives are saying what they think. And I don't think that's the reason. It could be. It could play a little factor in it. But it almost makes me wonder, how much is the media lying to you? How much are those just little isolated events that are just happening in one place or the other, and that's not the atmosphere on campuses everywhere else?
Well, I mean, I think, certainly there's some truth to that. I mean, I think largely the opinions of flyover country, the people that elected Donald Trump, that gave him the popular vote in Wisconsin, in Pennsylvania, in Florida. I like to say popular vote because it drives them nuts. But that's the truth. The popular vote in Arkansas was won by Donald Trump in the 2016 election. And they largely ignore us. I mean, they are in their little bubbles themselves. They're in these little coastal, West Coast, East Coast bubbles. And they, what's important to them, they've got everybody around them, kind of like, kind of like we do. But everybody around them is telling them and agreeing with them. We were talking to a Silicon Valley expert, and he was saying, as a conservative, it's so hard to be in California and be in Silicon Valley, and how people will just volunteer their political opinions because they assume that you agree with them. The difference here is everybody's in their little bubble, in their little circle, But these guys on the coast have these massive microphones and media arms. And so their entire way of looking at the world and interpreting events is skewed. And then here we are. And honestly, I know you've probably seen the Hunger Games.
Yes.
I'm assuming. Sorry. I've seen them. My wife's seen them. She read the books and everything else. But, people start talking about, we want to go to this, we want to get rid of the Senate, or we want to, just go to straight democracy and everything else. Well, if you look at the population centers, that's exactly what you would have. You would have this Hunger Games scenario where, people who are in the middle of America, the outside districts, if you will, would just be, we don't care about you. You're in a rural area. There's not enough of you to vote, and then you'd have presidential, if you got rid of the Electoral College, rather, you just have presidential campaigns in the populated areas, and that's it. They wouldn't need to come to Arkansas or Tennessee or anybody else. Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, so it's funny you say that, because I've actually thought about that a lot, because of course my brain is politically wired, and so when I watch that movie, I think about it every time. Could this be a reality for us one day?
Aside from the hand-to-hand combat, but yeah.
Right.
But maybe, who knows?
So what's funny is Little Rock, so in Arkansas, Little Rock and Fayetteville are their own bubbles. They're much more liberal than the rest of the state.
Mm-hmm.
And so in Paragould, I can walk down the street and talk to you, just assume you're a conservative. So that's funny you say they just assume you're a liberal, because I just assume everyone's a conservative.
Right.
Heck, we're in Arkansas. It's not that way in Little Rock. And my class in law school, it's about 50% out-of-staters. And for the most part, they're more liberal, and that's fine. And even the people that are from Little Rock, they're just more liberal. And a woman made a comment to me one time. She was looking up a professor on Rate My Professor, and she was like, the only thing people were complaining about is that she's really liberal. That's so weird to me. Maybe it's because we're in Arkansas? And I'm like, yes, that's exactly why. And she's from Central Arkansas, so I'm like, that's crazy.
Yeah, so there is
the difference that we
regional.
See. And, I've made the comment several times in Little Rock. This is the first time I've ever seen a Democrat campaign sign. And they're everywhere. The ratio, just I guess, of the regions I was in, well outnumbered the Republican yard signs. And I came back through Paragould during this last election cycle. I saw 2 Democratic campaign signs, and I thought then, that may be the first one I've ever saw in Paragould.
Yeah.
And it's funny because nationally we're very regionally bubbled out, but it's also that way in the state.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. It's been really enjoyable to see how my little corner of the world works in Arkansas, and then how the big dogs, quote unquote, work in Little Rock. So it's been fun and been interesting.
Hannah Webb, it's always great to have you in the studio. Appreciate your opinion.
I'm always happy to be here.
Good luck in the finals, or or taking the finals. It's not like it's the NBA finals, but
It
good
feels
luck
like
on your
the NBA finals.
Good luck on your tests.
Thank